My name is Erin Mulhern, for those of you who don't know me. And Jim, or Dad, was my dad. So I'm so pleased to be here today, and this is a great honor for me to say a few words about my dad. Well, if you know my dad, it might be more than a few words, so I hope that you can bear with me. Again, thank you to everyone for being here today, coming both near and far, especially in the weather today. I think I checked the forecast in Newmarket, at least it said snow, rain, freezing rain, and a fog. I'm like, oh my goodness, what did we have? So thank you again, everyone, for being here. As I look around, I can see many family, friends, neighbors, business acquaintances, musicians, singers, and townspeople who are here. This shows how loved Dad was and how much he will be missed. I know Dad would love to see and greet every one of you, and then would probably not hesitate to chat away for a bit. Still waters run deep. That's what my grandma, Istrati, Dad's mother-in-law, who greatly adored my dad, would say to me about her son-in-law. I was a kid. What did I know? She said it to me on multiple occasions. I would smile, nod my head, and think, what? Like, what exactly does that mean? Still waters run deep. But her words have never left me over the years. I think now, having witnessed the life that my dad has lived so very well, and the special touch he brought to everyone he knew, that these words describe my dad accurately. At first it appears to be a contradiction. On one hand, he was calm, humble, unassuming, and ever the gentleman. On the surface, but don't kid yourself. Underneath, there was a lot going on. Deep love, deep care, thought, and going along with many outstanding qualities. So here's what I have learned as his daughter about the still waters, which were so special in touching us, and indeed how they ran so deeply into our lives. Dad was born James Joseph Mulhern, or JJ, on October 6, 1941 in Chatham, Ontario, to my beloved grandparents Daniel and Genevieve, Jean as she was known, Mulhern. Dad was the eldest, and he lived with his sister Mary and Brian. I once asked Dad what he thought of his childhood. He had many friends, he told me, when he was a child, and was quite social. Tells to freeze. Mom and Dad met in Chatham and were married in, I believe, 1966.
You got it.
Oh, thanks to my husband for helping me with that math this morning. They welcomed my brother, Sean, into the world in 1967. Dad worked as an insurance adjuster for Morgan and Halwick Limited, and in 1969, he was promoted to manager to an office that was located in Clinton, Ontario, which brought him, my mom, and little Sean to Goderich to live. Brennan and I soon followed and were born in Goderich. Dad then struck out into business for himself, setting up J.J. Mulhern Insurance here in Goderich in 1978. This was a big step for him and our family. As legend has it, one fateful night in 1980, Dad spotted the light that was on late in the office on Elgin Avenue in Goderich. Mr. Wayne Lyons was working late. Dad knocked on the door and then nonchalantly strolled in. After a brief 20-minute conversation, likely cutting to the chase, he had a new business partner and insurance brokerage. Lyons and Mulhern Insurance was born, located at 46 West Street in Goderich. Indeed, it was also the start of a lifelong friendship with Wayne and Heather Lyons, who are like family to us. Well, they are family. For well over 3 decades, if I'm not mistaken, well over 3 decades, Dad and Wayne's business thrived, and Dad retired in 2016. Is that about right, Heather? More than 3 decades. Maybe 36 years. Dad was Mr. Reliable. He was always there when you needed him. He had this quiet and unassuming way of showing up just when he was needed, even before you were aware yourself that you needed him. He was also certainly someone you wanted around when there was a crisis. Heck, he was an insurance broker. He exemplified the BIPper. The BIPper, if you know the insurance symbol. I can't think of how many countless claims he handled for home, auto, and life insurance. And let's not forget crop insurance too. We called it cropping. I'm going cropping. He dealt with his clients professionally and calmly. He was certainly there for family and beloved community when they needed him most. In 1996, I believe, as I'm sure many of you had experienced, a tornado hit Goderich. That night, my dad had lost our beloved grandmother, Granny Mulhern, in Chatham, and had to rush back to Goderich that morning to help with the recovery efforts and insurance claims, especially the damage to our own house on Elgin Avenue. Similarly, in August 2011, an even worse F3 tornado unfortunately hit Goderich, and my dad was on board right away, helping clients, community, and all the while fixing his own damaged building at 56 West Street with Wayne. As you might have noticed from today's Mass, music was a huge part of Dad's life, a gift that was passed down to many of us in the family. During his youth, he was always involved with music. He played flute in the band, sang, and took up violin at a young age. There may be other instruments that I'm not aware of, but those are the ones I'm aware of. In typical Jim Mulhern style, Dad played fiddle, as he referred to, for friends at parties, such as the band parties. Sometimes playing old favorites such as Come to Me, My Melancholy Lady, when it was requested or not. But he also played in more professional settings, such as the Kincardine Scottish Fiddle Orchestra and Orchestra Grey Bruce, both located in Kincardine, I believe. In the latter, he played violin each Christmas for Handel's Messiah. Dad taught me my first song on the piano, Heart and Soul, do 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 do, and taught the same piece to other members of our family, including his granddaughter Ellie, with whom she did many duets. Dad loved singing, and his range was between a tenor and a bass. He was a part of many choirs, including St. Peter's Church Choir and the Harbour Airs. He also greatly enjoyed the theater, and he often took us to plays in Goderich, Blythe, and Stratford, but one of Dad's greatest loves was for the Livery, here in Goderich, the home to the Goderich Little Theatre, or GLT. Dad volunteered there to help with countless plays. He did the lighting, but also made a few cameos that appeared to have stolen the show. He also served as a board member and was devoted to maintaining and upgrading the livery, as well as being a GLT historian and archivist. As many of you know, my dad could also be quite the social butterfly and enjoyed lots of conversation, coffee, and chit-chat. Apparently, when Dad went for a coffee break at the Goderich restaurant or another venue around town, it could take Dad around 20 minutes to get to the table where he was supposed to meet someone. He had so many people to say hello to and talk with. Always the gentleman, Dad was not a fancy dresser, but rather, I would call him a snazzy dresser, and always put his best foot forward. Ironically and seemingly opposite to the social aspect of him is another remarkable quality about my dad. His ability to not only turn a phrase, often a short and pithy phrase, but to time it in the most optimal moment. He certainly could appreciate a good saying. For instance, if Dad wanted a deal, he would take out a coin, flip it, and say, double or nothing. It seemed that in my childhood, this was what he was doing all the time with salespeople, and was deliberately seeing how much he could embarrass his daughter. Depending on the outcome, he was supposed to get a discount or better, but he never really got a deal in my presence, but I'm certain he kept trying. If you asked how I could borrow your stapler or pen, this was something that happened to my husband at least, his first reply would sometimes be, cost you a quarter, which I knew my husband Yan found kind of weird, but I didn't even notice because that was one of Dad's constant phrases and jokes. He kept one interesting plaque in his office at Lyons and Mulhern Insurance, and when he retired at the studio, it read, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, Irish diplomacy, the ability to tell a man where to go so he looks forward to the trip. Whether or not it was true, I'm not sure, but at least clients had ample warning of what they were getting into. I'm not sure if he did this one to my two older brothers, Sean and Brennan, but he would say, 10% Aaron, when he would see that I was eating a donut, cake, or some other tempting treat. He would then proceed to take a huge bite of whatever was on my plate. Safe to say, I was a bit confused in math class as to what I thought was 10% was actually more like 50%.
It was just you, Aaron.
Oh, I'm so honored, so honored. Aaron, don't look back. This is what he said to me when I left for university in Montreal. It was a challenging time in our family, and although I didn't know it at the time, he knew that I had to forge my own way, and this was his way of telling me. And the night before I got married, I asked Dad, what was his advice about marriage? I was expecting a bit of a list or maybe a long-winded explanation. What was I thinking? Instead, he paused, simply said, be happy. His advice will always be with me. While Dad may have been a man of few words at times, his actions and love for those around him spoke volumes. They were a wonderful expression of his enduring care, love, and generosity. He was always there to help anywhere, any way he could. There are many examples of this that I cannot, probably my list will not be complete. He was involved in Kingsmen, Big Brothers, and other organizations where he could help his community. He also drove people in Goddard to and from places out of town for medical appointments, even in those last few years of the pandemic. Also, when Yan and I decided to return to Ontario from Montreal, Dad was there to suss out a new house to live in Newmarket, Aurora area. I cannot remember one time when he ever complained. He could make hard tasks look simple. He had such an interesting air about him, going about his day singing a tune to himself or filling you in on a historical fact that he recently found out. In fact, I think Dad was a quiet intellectual, which supported another one of his qualities, his curiosity. He was always reading a book, often one on history or a mystery novel. And he loved history for its own sake. He had the biggest collection of Time Life books on World War II of anyone I knew. And he was deeply into genealogy, keeping extensive records of our family, meticulously updating facts in the Family Tree Maker software decades before Ancestry.com came into fashion. I loved that Dad was also open to new ideas and kept up to date with technology and changes, such as his iPhone and features on his Toyota Hybrid, which we had to look up in the manual together. Dad had this way of never really announcing something to you. Instead, he just kind of got you to go along with him, which always ended up being a good thing, by the way. At least this was my experience as his daughter. Perhaps it was those deeper waters of him at play. I can remember one time when I was living in Montreal, he had helped Mom get set up for one of her art shows in Westport. He had a few days to come and see me, and mentioned something about going to a place called Grosse Ile, Quebec. "It's just north of Quebec City," he said to me on the phone. So knowing that my dad never got lost, and understanding that he might need someone to help him a little bit with the French side of things, I agreed to join him. Well, it turned out to be quite an interesting trip to what is known as the Ellis Island of Canada, where there is an Irish Memorial National Historical Site. The island was the site of an immigration depot which housed the predominantly Irish immigrants coming to Canada to escape the Great Famine of 1845 to 1849. I had never learned about this exact place in school. It was a nice trip with Dad and I together. I have a photo of Dad standing next to an enormous monument of a 4-story high Celtic cross on the island. Thanks, Dad, for letting me tag along. Dad enjoyed driving, usually his Toyotas, and some of my fondest memories are the numerous trips we went on as kids. We went many times to see family in Chatham and Regina. We also went on vacations to Kentucky, Florida, and South Carolina, as well as Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City. I'm so grateful for having traveled so much and learning to read a map. Yes, kids, that was before GPS. Mom and him took many trips out to Saskatchewan to see my grandmother, sometimes taking 5 or more days to get there. I heard rather comical stories about these excursions. I think driving might have been a cathartic outlet for my dad, for after our beloved Granny Mulhern died, his last surviving parent, he went on a drive of the Oklahoma Trail in the US by himself. I asked him to call me each day, which he didn't. It may have been every second or third day, but he was safe. I think it was just something he had to do. My dad also really enjoyed sports and was quite athletic. He played tennis, golf, volleyball, amongst other sports. He taught Sean, Brennan, and I to skate and throw a softball. We would also go cross-country skiing together each winter in Goderich. In his later years, he also enjoyed yoga, working out at Goderich Y, and walks on the beach. He loved to cycle, and when he came to Newmarket to visit, we would go on bike rides on the trails nearby my house, or with his brother Brian and his sister-in-law Marion. He was planning on buying an e-bike at some point, so he could go all the way up to Ben Miller, he told me. He was an avid swimmer as well. In fact, had my dad not been swimming laps at the YMCA in Chatham, he might not have met Mom. I can remember being on his shoulders on the waters of Lake Huron at the beach, and then without warning, dunking me backwards into the water, forcing water up my nose. He was also loving sailing, and he had sailed since he was a teenager. In fact, that he could have a sailboat on Lake Huron was a great plus for him when they moved to Goderich. As kids, we all went sailing. I think he secretly got a kick out of taking his daughter out for a sail, and once we were almost back in the harbor, somehow not getting the small outboard motor to work when we happened to be near a large freighter in the harbor. I was so worried about getting sucked into the freighter. But Dad, remember those still waters I was talking about? He would calmly just hand me a paddle and say, we would be fine, which we were. I just found out that he actually did the same thing to my oldest brother, Sean. Perhaps this was a life lesson that he was trying to impart to us. Dad first had cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, when he was 44. With the constant care of my mom, our family, and doctors, and medical team, he fought hard with Irish tenacity and resolve and bounced back. Dad accepted that this was a part of his life now, and he was diligently followed by his medical team throughout the years. Despite this, Dad is one of the healthiest people I continue to know, and I mean that physically, mentally, and spiritually. He knew how to pace himself in all these regards. He is the reason I take good care of my own health, and thank you so much, Dad, for that gift. He was a devout Catholic, saying his prayers each night, going to Mass at least twice a week, to my knowledge, perhaps more. He was also doing courses online with the church over the last year or so, and perhaps more. We want to give a special thanks to the expert doctors, nurses, and many other compassionate staff at Victoria Hospital in London, Ontario, and in Goderich, Ontario. We would also like to especially thank our extended family for all your love and support, and Dad's niece, particularly Dr. Katie, for being both the heart and head through the experience in Dad's last weeks. Her medical expertise and taking the time to help us better understand what was going on with Dad in his final days in the ICU were very helpful, beyond helpful. Special thanks also to Wayne Lyons and Heather Lyons for their dearly appreciated help with the untimely passing of Dad, the complex funeral planning, and everything else that they've done for my family over many years. In close, as I mentioned, Dad was a quiet intellectual. In this light, Dad did many courses on sailing. One of them, I was told, was on navigation, which allowed him to navigate a sailboat without the use of modern-day instruments. Instead, he guided the boat using only the stars. Well, my dear loving, kind, incredible Daddy, those stars are looking down upon you and guide you as they share their warmth and their warm wisdom with you. Your still waters still run deep with all of us. And although you have sailed away from us for now, you have loved us well, and we have loved you. You have lived a life that is full. You will be missed greatly. I'm sure that you are out there on Lake Huron. There are calm waters with just enough wind in your sails and the rudder firmly in your hand. The grace of God shines round you, and we will hold you in our hearts